Well, Israel has, of course, closed its border crossings to the Gaza Strip. That means there is only one other theoretical option for Palestinians to leave Gaza, the Rafah border crossing to Egypt. The Egyptian government is in talks with the U.S. and Israel on allowing humanitarian aid to pass through, but it won't open corridors for Palestinians to leave Gaza. Well, for more on the role of Egypt in this crisis, I want to bring in Seth Binder. He's Advocacy Officer at the think tank Project on Middle East Democracy. He joins me from the U.S. tonight. Seth, it's good to have you with us. Do you see a scenario in which Egypt would open its borders to Gaza to allow refugees to escape?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think, one of the lessons we definitely should take away from this weekend is never say never. As you were saying, the preference, I think, of the Egyptian government is to not allow refugees to come into Egypt, and instead to allow humanitarian assistance to flow into Gaza in the ways that they have done in previous sort of escalations of violence like we're seeing now. At the same time, I also would say, this is not unique to Gaza. Egypt has not necessarily wanted refugees coming from Sudan down on its southern border, Libya to its west. And so I think it's a bit of a pattern in terms of Egypt. And in their defense, to a degree, they themselves are suffering severe economic crisis. Inflation is at its highest levels, unsustainable debt. And so it's a real difficult time to be in Egypt. And so having a burden of refugees flowing in is something that would, be quite difficult.
Is this, though, just about economics? I mean, when we look at Hamas in Gaza, we could imagine that if the Rafah gate were to be open and you had this flood of Palestinians into Egypt, the government in Egypt could be concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, increasing its strength in the country. And we know that that is something that the current president of Egypt would not stand for. I mean, there are political and ideological reasons for keeping that gate closed, aren't there?
I think, the Egyptian government is definitely emphasizing security concerns from Hamas. I would say on the Muslim Brotherhood, inside the country, over the past decade, they've essentially been decimated. The Brotherhood themselves, for decades, at least sort of the core group, have, distanced themselves from violence and been opposed to it. There's certainly splinter groups and so forth. I don't see a real actual threat in terms of that. At least Brotherhood actions inside Egypt. Now, obviously, if Hamas operatives were escaping, that's a different scenario. But I don't think it's a real concern in terms of the Brotherhood.
Would you say that Egypt maybe is telling us that by opening the border and allowing Palestinians to enter en masse, that would harm the Palestinian cause to have its own state?
I think you've seen some Egyptians emphasize this, but I think Palestinians themselves have also emphasized this. The right of return is a major issue for Palestinians. From 48 to 67 and on, we've seen where when Palestinians have left Palestine, they've not been able to return. And so I think it's a legitimate concern among many that if they were to leave Gaza, they would not be able to return.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he is in the Middle East with his team. What can they achieve in Egypt? And I'll put it another way, is there any chance of a negotiated settlement which does not include Egypt?
I think the secretary is there now. We're seeing the Secretary of Defense is going to be there tomorrow, I believe. They're trying to show their steadfast support for Israel, that they have their back no matter what, and that's sort of what they've been emphasizing. I think certainly, now that he's announced that he's extending his trip to other countries in the region, There's going to be other priorities, helping, hopefully, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and doing whatever they can on that front. I think in terms of Egypt, we should expect there to be a role. There tends to be one. There has been one in previous moments like this. But he's also not just going to Egypt. He's going to some of these other countries in the region because they also matter. I think one should definitely look at countries like the UAE and others who signed the Abraham Accords and be expecting and almost calling on them to be doing more. Part of the Abraham Accords, when it was sold, at least here in the United States, was that these countries would now have more of an influence with Israel. And now seems to be the time, given the vulnerability of civilians in Gaza.
Seth Binder with the Project on Middle East Democracy. Seth, we appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by Hisham Mahana, a communications officer with the International Committee of the Red Cross from Gaza. It's good to have you with us. Could you just tell us, what are you witnessing and seeing right now on the ground there in Gaza?
First of all, thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to give you a brief about the situation in Gaza Strip. What we can say at the moment is that we have reached the level of catastrophe at all levels. There's a complete blackout across the Gaza Strip, which impacts directly the households or what's left of the neighborhoods that were not impacted by the hostilities, and whatever left from the infrastructure of power, water, and wastewater supplies. It also impacts significantly the healthcare system entirely in Gaza Strip. There are a lot of hospitals and medical care centers who are out of service, and the remaining operational hospitals now are running only on generators run by fuel, and they are in limited quantities and are also about to run out. The Ministry of Health in Gaza issued a plea saying that they are running out. They actually ran out of most items of the medication, the medical supplies, the equipment, and also now patients are being treated on the floors as the bed capacity has been exceeded by 100%.
Hisham, let me ask you. Let me ask you about what we're hearing from the UN. The UN says that the number of people in Gaza who have been displaced or made homeless, that number has increased by 30% in just the last 24 hours. I mean, that's an unbelievable number there. Are there enough accommodations for these people who have seen their apartments blown up?
First of all, Gaza has no shelters, as the world understands the word of shelter. They are basically UNRWA schools. And those who managed to escape under fire actually are not all inside the UNRWA schools. They managed to reach to their beloved ones, families, friends. I'm now staying at one of my friends for example. However, those who were instructed to evacuate without clear instructions to safe haven. This is another concern for us. Entire neighborhoods got destroyed in a matter of a few hours. Entire families are, now no longer exist on the civil registry. Some of the families are still under the rubble of their own households. The civil defense could not reach them in time due to the lack of the required supplies, equipment, and also because of the lack of, safe access. Yesterday, the Palestine Red Crescent Society, our humanitarian partner, lost 4 of their emergency medical teams while they were on their way to conduct a humanitarian mission risking lives. They literally lost their lives there, and we have condemned the act of attacking, the medical missions in anywhere, in any place, and in any context. This is completely unacceptable and against the international humanitarian law principles. We have been existing in this delegation in Israel and the occupied territory since 1957, And we have never witnessed this level of, spiraling violence, conduct of hostilities, targeting civilian populations, attack against, the medical missions, including journalists. One of the ICRC residences was partially damaged as it was located in one of the heavily bombarded neighborhoods in the heart of the Gaza City.
Yeah.
This is also hampering, the activity of the humanitarian missions in Gaza. And we are, as the ICRC, have been in constant dialogue with both, parties to the conflict to ensure the safe access of the medical teams, the humanitarian teams, as well as to protect the civilians and civilian properties.
Hisham, let me just ask you also about the Rafah crossing. That is the crossing, the only gate to get out of Gaza that leads to Egypt. That gate is now closed. We've been hearing, though, that it's being used to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. Can you confirm that? I mean, how are you getting medical supplies or food or the things that are needed? How are they being brought into Gaza right now?
Yes, the Rafah crossing is the only gate remaining open to Gaza Strip. However, it's not accessible for any medical missions or humanitarian missions so far as announced. It was directly targeted a few days, 2 days ago. We welcome any efforts that would eventually lead to the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza Strip. That includes medicine, food, and fuel, enough to run the sole Gaza plant, and also to help the humanitarian teams and the doctors and nurses and at hospitals continue saving lives.
Hisham, let me be careful.
Or anyone else.
Let me be clear about this. So you're not getting anything from outside through that gate or anywhere right now in Gaza. So you're saying nothing is coming into the Gaza Strip at this moment at all in terms of humanitarian aid?
As of this moment, absolutely nothing has entered into the Gaza Strip, unfortunately.
Okay. And are you seeing what we're hearing reports that food and water have begun running out in neighborhoods? Are you seeing that?
Yes, I'm actually witnessing, I've seen myself, some families trying to reach, the accessible shops, pharmacies, or bakeries to get food, medicine, and drinking water. These, supplies are running out of the stores, and there is no, supply to accumulate or to cover the gap. There is a food crisis in Gaza because, egg is not available in the market. Crops are not available in the market. We are supposed to be in the middle of the olive harvest season, which is an annual celebration, and this is also another, cost of the as a humanitarian consequence. So we are about to witness also an environmental crisis due to the absence of, water and wastewater pump stations to be seen operational. We are witnessing actually a humanitarian crisis at all levels, but on top of that, we are witnessing a crisis of hope.
Hisham, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. It's important to get this story out. Hisham Mahana, Communications Officer with the International Committee of the Red Cross in Gaza. Thank you.